Hello everyone, it's been a little while. Welcome back to Elden Ring Lore Explained. We kind of stopped doing this for several months because I lost motivation. I hadn't really played the game much in a long time. There weren't that many lore topics I was super interested in, at least ones that I was that informed upon. I didn't really feel like I was knowledgeable enough to do a good video on those topics. So I took a break, and then a couple months ago I decided to do a second playthrough, a lore playthrough, kind of. It was like a 75% lore playthrough, in which I would be trying to do more of a deep dive into the lore, trying to get a better understanding of everything, trying to get new perspectives on things, and also just trying to have a less terrible playthrough of the game. I just finished that like a week ago. Yeah, about a week ago, a little over a week ago. Um, and I feel far more enlightened, far more knowledgeable about everything. And I feel like the best way to kick off the return to these is to do a full comprehensive timeline of the events within the lands between. Because this will be a pretty good foundation for basically anything we talk about after this point. Um, Now, as I'm sure you can clearly see, the format for this video is a little bit different than the previous ones, because I'm no longer just recording a singular image on OBS and then adding in pictures later in editing. I noticed that a lot of the lore channels were using Miro for their videos because it's, like, insanely convenient for this format of video. So might as well get with the program. I did, and this is indeed incredibly convenient for these sort of discussion videos. So, free advertisement for Miro. Miro, my DMs are open if you want to do a sponsorship. I will gladly accept. So, before we get into this, let's introduce the people that are going to be with us here tonight.
We should be free to use the text chat.
That's good.
We have Ace, Chilled, and Neve. Say hello,
Hello.
everyone.
Greetings.
These are various
Hello
people that
there.
I
Man.
believe have appeared in all of the previous ones at various points. I'm pretty sure you've all been in these
Yeah.
before.
Yeah,
I
with different
believe
mic
so.
qualities though.
Yeah, varying mic qualities now.
I have got a very bad mic.
Still, do you have the same mic you had before?
Yes.
But Ace has a new one. $100 Blue Yeti microphone. Amazing.
Don't let your dreams be dreams.
So, we should start off, as you always do with these sorts of things, at the beginning. If I can zoom in. I can. It's a little
go
slow
ahead.
because I have so many things open at once.
I think there's one major question we have to ask even before that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
The lands between what? Middle-earth and
Um,
Hyrule?
it's not
Between a
really
lot of
clear.
other land.
It just seems to be there is a fog separating it from everything else. So I don't know. It's some kind of in-between plane. It's between life and death. It's
It almost
just
feels like
Fog
you
seems
between
to
two
be
continents
Middle-earth.
or something. It's really not
Like,
clear.
Fog is a pretty big deal anyway in most From Software games.
It's
Just
between
look
the
at
two
Demon's Souls.
hemispheres of the Earth. I have no idea. It's really vague. Every
DLC?
FromSoft
Please
setting is
elaborate.
separated by fog.
Does Middle-earth just take place in between the crust and the inner layer of the planet?
Of course.
No, Middle
Uh,
Earth is just Europe.
Yeah.
No,
Even
literally, it's just
better.
Europe.
Literally, yeah. With Australian elements.
No, I
It's
mean
actually
it's
just New
I
Zealand.
mean New Zealand, but
It-
yeah,
I was
that's
gonna
it-
fine.
say,
it's
every
just
Power
close.
Ranger show in America is half Japanese footage and half New Zealand footage.
That's really wild to think about. I didn't know that until somewhat recently.
Yeah, anyway, Elden Ring.
Elden Ring. The
Oh,
beginning of
Elden
the
Ring.
timeline, as far as we can tell, is the arrival of the Elden Beast. Why is this? Why doesn't the meteor that births the Onyx Lords and maybe the dragons precede this? Well, because the arrival of the Elden Beast isn't necessarily the creation of the Crucible, because it seems like the Crucible was separate from the Elden Ring at a time.
Uh-huh.
But the arrival of the Elden Beast is when the Greater Will decides to send its vassal down to the Lands Between in order to establish order. It seems to have done this on many other worlds based on the arena for the Elden Beast fight. That seems to
Yeah,
suggest either other planets, or maybe that's meant to be representative of the other player worlds, which suggests a multiverse exists, like one casually does in almost every single FromSoft game.
Maybe the
yes, I
Elden
believe
Beast is
it's
the main character from Bloodborne after the true ending.
the Elden
That'd be
Beast is
whack.
stated to be just like one of many envoys sent by the Greater Will.
Yeah, so the Elden Beast is the Greater Will's equivalent of John from accounting, and to us it is a god. Just to keep the scaling of the universe in perspective. Now, this causes
That's
the One
unfathomable.
Great to fracture. The One Great is only ever mentioned by Hayata, who is transcribing the words of the Three Fingers, which, to be fair, is
Is
probably
biased.
not the most reliable source of information, because
But hey, it's the only source we have.
it's the only source of information we have. So we kind of
And
have to work with that.
like I can't remember the exact way to do this, because it has been a while since I've been taking history classes and whatnot. But like the Three Fingers would most likely be like a first-hand account. So even if they do just tell lies upon lies, they are more reliable than anyone who would have heard it from someone who was there.
Yes,
Was
and
that a
I
pun?
find it very unlikely that Hayata is lying, because I see literally no reason Hayata would not say whatever the Three Fingers have transcribed to her.
Mm,
So the One Great is initially this amorphous, all-encompassing everything. All concepts are just one giant
mixing pot of everything.
melting pot of everything called the One Great. Initially, I thought it was supposed to be the God, the one supreme God. This was back when I thought the Greater Will was an outer God amongst all of the other ones, and that the One Great was the big God. But no, it seems the One Great is the original state of the world, in which there are no individual concepts. Everything is just kind of together. It's human instrumentality. The Lord of Frenzied Flame ending is human instrumentality, where everyone just becomes one singular united thing.
That sounds like the backstory from Bleach.
Yes.
Yeah, the Frenzied Flame ending is the ultimate regression,
Yes.
returning everything back to the One Great.
Speaking of, the arrival of the Elden Beast and the creation of the Elden Ring, the establishment of order, of rules, establishes concepts, and thus things are differentiated from each other, and they fracture, and this creates the world as we know it. Kind of. There are
With
things
life
that have
and
been
death
removed
and
from the
whatnot.
Elden Ring
And
that
therefore
aren't around
concept
anymore.
erased.
But for the most part, it's the world that we know. And this fracturing creates the outer gods, kind of. At this point in time, they are just gods.
Yeah.
Recent revelations, that were apparently old revelations for the Japanese lore community, have made us realize that the outer gods are not necessarily Lovecraftian eldritch beings, though they kind of are. Like, there is still some connotation to suggest they are to some extent. But they are, in fact, effectively kami. They're nature spirits.
And natural causes.
Yeah, nature spirits.
If you believe in animism, is it animism? Is that what it's called? Where just there's spirits for everything in nature?
Yeah, that was it.
Yes.
Yeah. A paganistic
Including
thing,
plants.
which is fairly common. There are various paganistic aspects. It makes sense when you consider how things were during the Age of the Crucible and the time of Godfrey. We'll get into that later. There is a god of sorts that represents everything. The entities that we don't hear referenced as outer gods are not called that because they do not go against the Golden Order. The outer gods are likely called as such because they are gods that exist outside of order. You will notice that all of the outer gods are beings that are, first off, effectively conceptual entities, and two, highly relate to death. The fell god of flame relates to fire and destruction. The frenzied flame is madness and just the destruction of all things, though the frenzied flame has a greater purpose. Death
It was
is
totally
just
the one
death,
great.
though I think specifically that death is the transference of the soul to the afterlife, something that doesn't happen
It's
anymore
like
under the Golden
burial
Order.
death.
Rot, obviously it's the decay of things and the birth of something new. Under the Golden Order, things just kind of last the way they are forever, and the Formless
Fungus
Mother
people.
represents blood loss, wounding, the damage and destruction of things. These are all things that exist outside order. The only exception to this, and that exception is more in terms of importance and magnitude, is the Frenzied Flame. The Frenzied Flame exists effectively as an equal opposite to the Elden Ring.
It's its natural contradiction.
Exactly. It is a how does it go? For every force, there's an equal opposing a force. That's effectively what the
Yes.
Frenzied Flame is. The introduction of the Elden Ring and order to the One Great created an opposing force that would be able to return things to the One Great, and that's effectively what the Frenzied Flame is.
Yeah,
It's
the
a big
frenzied
reset
flame
button to fix God's mistakes.
it doesn't seem like a concept that could be removed from the Elden Ring. It just exists there.
I also guarantee it probably destroys the Elden Ring in the Frenzied Flame ending. Probably
Most
does.
likely.
For sure. Like, if you look at the fucking archery, that thing's like split open like a fucking I can't think of a quirky analogy right now. But yeah, that thing's gone. Like,
And
if
it
you
looks
think the
like the
Elden
flame
Ring's
is
surviving
channeling
that,
into the sky.
no. No, it's fucking not.
Considering that the
It is
Frenzied
not
Flame
surviving that.
destroys not only the physical but the immaterial, it destroys thought, yeah, it probably destroyed the Elden Ring. Now, after the arrival of the Elden Beast, the creation of the Elden Ring, we have these series of events here that I'm not entirely sure which preceded which. Like, even then, this meteor crashing could have... It probably didn't, because it seems like the world as it is just didn't exist until the Elden Beast arrived. But we do know that a meteor crashed, and that was what led to the rise of the Onyx Lords. They were given life by a meteor. This seems to maybe play a bit into the theory that bacteria was introduced to the Earth through comets. Seems somewhat similar to that in my personal opinion. And
Yeah,
it's
that
maybe
makes sense.
possible that the dragons came from this as well, the ancient dragons, because they are stone beings. When we find
Either
dead
that
ones
or
that have
they
fallen apart, they have no
Either that
flesh
or they
interior.
originate from the Greater Will themselves, because they're made from gold underneath.
Maybe. That's a possibility. But it definitely seems like the
Yeah.
ancient dragons are the first servants of the Greater Will. It's not really clear if the Two Fingers were a thing yet. They might have been, they might not. We don't really have, like, any sort of cultural reference to them existing.
There
Right,
isn't really any
so-
ancient Two Fingers.
Yeah, the oldest
So these-
references
Like
we
the
have to them
towers.
is human interaction with them.
Right, so these guys are rocks because they come before the creation of flesh, right?
That is my assumption. They are just kind of a weird anomaly. So I have a feeling they probably preceded it. And it would probably also explain why the ancient dragons are the oldest race in the world. They precede the thing that allowed all other races to exist, that being the Crucible, which, as far as we could
They are
tell,
made of stone to be everlasting.
was a big life tree, a tree of life that just brought organic beings into existence. At
Is
this
the Crucible
time,
the Great Tree?
it's not really clear. It could
Ah.
be. It's possible. I would maybe even go so far as to say it's likely.
Hell, maybe even that, cause at the, big gate to the Earth Tree, there's that shattered off piece at the bottom.
Yeah, that
Maybe
could
that's the
represent that.
Crucible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
'cause-
If not
alternatively,
Helfin.
I think maybe maybe Helfin's there. The
The Great
lamplight.
Tree is no, the Crucible is referred to as the primal form of the Tree.
Yeah, I think it's just
And-
the inside part of the Erd tree, the part that's not
So,
all covered
yeah.
in grace. That's what I assume the Crucible is.
Alright.
But in this time, all organic life in this unfortunately low quality image compared to some of the other ones that I have.
Oh well, it does look funny.
It does look kind of funny. All
Indeed,
life
it
just kind of
looks-
shares the same features, and this generally looks like the Misbegotten. They're just kind of these weird chimeric creatures. They have tails, wings, feathers, scales, horns.
Sort of looks like the old harpies.
Kinda,
Claws.
yeah.
Like that.
And
They
it
simply
seems
have
like
too much life.
over time, as being spread off, it's kind of like how biodiversity comes into being. Creatures that share similar traits move off into different environments, and
Yeah,
whichever
evolve to
traits,
said environments.
yeah, whichever traits are more advantageous are the ones that get passed down due to natural selection. So, as being spread out over time, You have less things that look like the Misbegotten in the Omen, and more things that just look like other creatures. Other creatures that share pretty much all of the main features of the Crucible would be the modern dragons. They share all of those features as well. I think it's possible that the modern dragons are either beings, creatures that came into being because somehow the ancient dragons were able to influence the Crucible in some way, they were able to imprint themselves onto it, or they are just creatures that look really similar to ancient dragons but don't actually have any relation to them.
Hey, maybe in the lands between, dragons are like crabs. Everything will evolve into dragons.
Well, it does seem like the bears are turning into dragons,
I
Somebody
mean-
so...
watch the Game Grumps play Elden Ring.
The modern dragons do have a connection to the
No,
ancient
I haven't.
dragons, as the dragon wound grease involves the gravel stones being lethal to them.
that is true.
I was gonna say that it seems like every current living thing in this world is an example of divergent evolution from the same ancestors.
Well, pretty much. I mean, that seems to be what the existence of the Crucible suggests, is that just
Yeah.
all life, for the most part, came from the same thing.
You, that giant shrimp, that crab, that living boulder, you have the same great-grandmother.
Now,
Yeah,
one
well,
of the
that's
first
Fucking hot.
divergent species that we get are the Beastmen, who kind of look like the Misbegotten, but they're lacking in several of the features, notably the wings, and they don't have any scales. They are just furry humanoids. I think they have tails. Some of them do. The Beastmen seemingly originally may have just been beasts, but the Greater Will seemingly gave them intelligence, probably for the purpose of serving the ancient dragons, because they
To
do
build
seem to
for
be
them.
effectively a servant caste. A lot of the iconography and statues we find around Furum Azula seems to depict them not looking very happy and being chained by gold. They are essentially being forced into servitude, probably at the risk of having intelligence taken away from them.
So
Actually,
they
I
are
kinda
bound by
thought, right?
duty.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, would like, uh, since like the beastmen are like, you know, dogs and whatnot, usually, if not cats, then like in the fucking lands between, the tarnished are evolved from dogs and cats as opposed to monkeys.
Maybe. We actually don't know if humans evolved from the Beastmen or not. It's kind of hard to say because this whole
Really?
section of the timeline here takes place over the course of millions, if not billions, of years.
It's a big enigma.
So, I'm sorry to say this, but this timeline is not based on how long each of these periods are. It is based on how much information I have on each of these periods. Which is why the Age of the
Otherwise,
Erd
there'd
Tree
just
is...
be really huge gaps.
Right, it would be gigantic. So, at some point after this, Placidusax becomes Elden Lord. The dragons have presumably what is some sort of equivalent to Marika, that is like the god that eventually flees. And Placidusax rules over the world for who knows how long.
Congrats to him.
Because despite the fact that the Rune of Death is still part of the Erd Tree, the dragons live forever. Or, not part of the Erd Tree, part of the Elden Ring. Dragons live forever. Why do the dragons live forever? Seemingly. Well, they're not biological. They don't originate from the
Well,
Crucible.
yeah.
They're stone.
They got
Stone
them
doesn't really
gravel
age.
stones.
Stone erodes.
As you can see there, but you know, stone's not gonna have a heart attack.
Right,
Stone's not gonna
exactly.
get dementia.
Exactly.
Placidusax
They are-
is basically just King Ghidorah.
Pretty much,
They are
if he had an extra head.
artificial.
Now, Placidusax's reign could have lasted for literal eons, like for millions of years. That's a very likely possibility. Their closeness to the Greater Will is seemingly far greater than any of the other Elden Lords, except for maybe Radagon, I guess. Well, I say this, we really only have 3 Elden Lords that we know about. But, you know, Radagon's just kind of
Elden Slayer.
effectively become a host. He is just a shell being puppeted by the Elden Beast, but that's not necessarily the Greater Will itself. Placidusax's fire is literally golden. He breathes the same fire that the Elden Beast does.
The only other person to do that, yes.
Yeah. Since there is no sort of indication of the Two Fingers being a thing, It may even be possible that the dragons somehow directly communed with the Greater Will. I could see that maybe being a possibility.
I just had a thought. So, like, with dragons being connected to the Greater Will to some extent,
Hmm.
with see this golden fire here, and Elden Beast also having a golden fire. Aren't the dragon communion spells faith based?
They're actually mostly arcane
Arcane
based, but they
based.
do have faith aspects. However, Placidus Axes, I don't believe has any arcane requirements. It's all faith.
Yeah, I guess that settles it.
Yeah, it is
To some
basically
extent.
the only one. Arcane is more like paganist stuff. It's more getting in tune with nature or the outer gods, whereas faith is just belief. So it would make sense then that Placidus Axis one is based mostly on faith because it's from him directly. He is not a lesser being that's worshipping dragons. He is a billion-year-old entity that may have directly communed with God itself.
These are the same terms used in D&D.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you have a big fantasy setting.
Arcane and divine magic.
Yep, exactly.
Lots of overlaps.
Now,
And then later on, get Moog being a warlock.
of course. Now, very interestingly, during the time of the Reign of the Dragons, there are two interesting things to take into consideration. One,
Aye.
the Elden Ring at that time had a lot more shit going on than the one today does. First off, you can
They
kind of see the Rune of Death
oversimplified the
right
design
around
over
there.
time.
And then you see all of these things. Now, are you guys capable of imagining a fourth dimension? You know what one
No.
dimension is? It's like a point. It's a singular point.
Yeah.
Two-dimension is a line, or like a fucking flat plane. Three-dimensional is what we live in. You cannot imagine higher dimensions. You also probably cannot imagine whatever other rules of physics existed during the time of the dragons that has apparently been removed over the eons, as each progressive reign decided, we don't really need this. Or want this, actually.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try to imagine that.
Don't even try to.
Like, I
It's
once had a
horrible.
dream akin to that, where more laws of physics existed. I had a headache for 3 days straight. It was very severe.
I'm getting
Yeah.
flashbacks to that one moment in Fire Force.
Don't do it.
I
Don't do it.
imagine. Now, another thing of note, the other big thing of note, is that during this time, and kind of during this whole upcoming time, death is an active thing, and it's managed by the Deathbirds, the servant of the Death God, or servants. I guess the direct servant would be the Twin
Yeah.
Bird,
And the
who
Twin Bird.
is the envoy of the Death God. We know this because when you go around Furu Missoula, there seems to be a lot of imagery that's very similar to the Twin Bird. And, you
Yeah, I
know,
watched
Yeah.
a video about that the other day.
yeah, Rune of
Well,
Death.
more specifically,
Yeah,
similar
we
to,
noticed this well.
the Twin Bird Shield.
Yeah. Considering how we had more close to God stuff back during this time, maybe the Deathbirds weren't even a thing. It was just the Twin Bird itself going around.
Maybe.
This was a time when gods walked the earth, I guess. More
I mean,
openly.
actually, right now, right?
Hmm.
Wouldn't most of civilization just be in Fire Missoula?
Pretty much, yeah. As far as we can tell. At least civilization
Yeah,
within
there's
the lands
In
between.
beast existence.
Yeah, so it could have just been the Twin Bird doing it all then.
Yeah, that's very
There's
possible.
not much space to cover.
That
Exactly.
is where a lot of Twin Bird imagery can be seen in Faramazula.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we do have a lot of imagery depicting creatures around what looks like a tree or a lamplight that look like Misbegotten. So, creatures akin to the Misbegotten, early primitive creatures that still shared many of the features of Crucible, those are the primary lesser life forms at the time. Also, I do believe there is at least a couple statues of good old Elden John, who we'll talk a little bit about soon.
My favorite enigma.
And there are also various statues of, like, a man and a woman holding a child. I have no idea what these represent. Could this represent America? Maybe, but, like, this is so far before America that I find that very unlikely. To be fully
Yeah,
honest,
maybe the LCD will shine some light on that.
maybe. I have no
Hopefully.
idea.
Who knows?
These things are an
Probably not.
enigma. These things are complete mysteries. It's like the snake person statue at the end of Ashes of Ariandel. We have no fucking idea what it means. Nobody knows. We have no clue. The reign of Placidus Axe ends when the dragon god flees. We don't know why they did. I don't believe this dragon god is an outer god, given our new context. I believe this was effectively their equivalent to America, an Empyrean, the host of the Elden Ring. Why did they flee? How did they flee? We don't know. All we know is that they did. This led to the eventual collapse of the dragon civilization. This was probably something that happened over time, but Placidusax decided to choose Farum Azula as the eternal time capsule of their civilization, and effectively his living tomb. It is a giant mausoleum city. As a matter of fact, Farum Azula is referred to as royal, and is a mausoleum, either suggesting that it was the royal mausoleum, that was just fucking gigantic, because one, they're dragons. Two, death seems to be much more centric to their society, which is, again, interesting, because the ancient dragons technically live forever. They're effectively immortal.
I mean, maybe because of that, like, whenever one of them did somehow die,
It
that
was
would
a
be
big
like a
fucking
big
deal.
thing.
It was probably a humongous deal. Also, it was maybe something kind of held over the heads of the servant creatures. It's like, you can die
Death
of
is
old
very
age.
essential. Death is very essential because you can see in the architecture that the very bodies of the beastmen are used for foundation for the next set of buildings.
Just like the Great Wall.
That's kind of metal.
That is very metal. It could maybe also be a way of Placidusax saying, well, God is gone, I might as well be dead. He effectively gave himself either like a pharaoh or Chinese emperor style burial of putting himself in this tomb and then choosing a handful of beastmen servants to come along with him. Which is why those guys are still there today, because Placidusax was just like, you are coming outside of time with me. Yeah.
Do you think there's a direct relation between Placidusax and the Elder Dragon Grail?
There could maybe be some kind of correlation. I mean, it's possible Grail served like a similar role, maybe. Or maybe Grail
like
was the
5
dragon
times
god.
bigger than
Probably not.
Placidusax.
True. So is
So,
Yeah,
Grandsax.
so is Grandsax, but like
Right, so what-
Grandsax is considerably weaker.
It's also of note that probably not all of the ancient dragons went to Farum Azula. I imagine they just kind of spread out. Because that does seem to
Right,
be what
so-
happened with a lot of the other dragons. As we get into...
question.
Yes.
Now that, the president, Mr. Placidusax, has locked himself outside of time and forgot the keys, what happens now? Like, there's no one controlling the land screen anymore, so...
Well, I'm glad you asked that, as we enter the pre-Erd Tree Age.
Dragon politics have fallen apart.
The dragon civilization falls apart. The dragons spread out. The modern dragons
Oh,
just kind of fuck
anarchy.
off.
The earliest case of
We
modern
know
dragons.
the ice dragons, frost dragons, whatever you want to call them. They colonize the mountaintops. They are there for a long fucking time. I want you to keep this in mind.
Right?
They predate even the giants.
Yes, they predate the fire giants, who are the ancient inhabitants of the mountaintops.
Oh.
If this is essentially, I want you to look at a timeline of the Earth. The dragons are like actual dinosaur age. Maybe you could push it to like Cambrian or some shit, if you really want to, because like Advent of the Crucible, Cambrian explosion.
No, they'd
There
be
are some
pre-Cambrian
correlations there.
then.
I guess they would technically be pre-Cambrian. Yeah, that's true actually. The dragons spread out. They do their thing. A bunch of civilizations rise and fall over this time, including what I've called the Whitestone Civilization, but what could maybe also be known as Ould. That's where the Ould Palace ruins in Liurnia are from. The most prominent features of this civilization are the Divine Towers, which seem to share the same architectural features, the Mogwin Palace, and this guy, who everyone has just seemed to start calling Elden John. He is a
I love Elden John.
humanoid man who appears to be very old, presumably very wizened because he wears robes. He's got a big beard, and he's holding stone tablets. Kind of reminds you of like Moses or something.
Tablets inside the troll chests?
Maybe. I always thought those kind of look more like tombstones.
I hear that was where they like ripped out the eye of the giant's god from the trolls, probably.
Yeah.
And only left it in the fire giant.
Right,
Yeah, probably something like that.
with this, right, you said that during this age, the divine towers would be there.
Correct.
So by now, the fingers have appeared. Because the fingers are
Indeed.
atop the
I'm
tower.
glad
Yeah.
you mentioned that, because at some point after this, by the way, stuff that doesn't have like a line attached to it and it's kind of detached, it is something that happens around this time, but I can't really tell when.
They just
Wait,
kind
hold
of
on.
exist
So,
then.
got it. So, when Placidus Axe locked himself out of the world, that's when the Great Will was like, hey, we can't just have this be fucking around doing whatever it wants. Send in our finger guys.
Our finger guys. Yeah,
Yeah,
that may be something like
yeah,
that. Where like
yeah, because
direct
they
communion
lost.
is probably not a good idea. I question if Marika communed directly with the Greater Will or not, or just communed with the Two Fingers, considering that she had questions about how the Golden Order and the Elden Ring worked. Um, Probably wasn't directly communing with the Greater Will. But at some point, humans evolve. We know this because we have evidence of, well, we have direct depictions of them interacting with the Two Fingers. The Two Fingers are in the Divine Towers, which were created God knows how long ago. So at some point, Would encounters the Two Fingers. They literally build giant towers for talking to them. The Three Fingers are encountered at some point in the tomb of some ancient god, um, and the ancestral followers develop. I know these guys look really different from humans, but I'm thinking these guys are an ancient variety of human. They're an old.
I
They're
think the horns
like
are ornamental.
Neanderthals, because
Yeah.
you see various human characters, usually really old human characters. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes because, well, no
Of
one dies of
course.
old age. Doesn't seem like people really age that much in general anymore. Um, Characters like Renala, characters like Godfrey to an extent, characters like good old Elden John over here are humanoid, but they have kind of strange proportions. They got a bit of a small head and they got really long arms,
Very
long
big.
limbs. They're big
Oh,
people.
I get it. Elden John.
Yeah, there you go.
I just thought you were saying Elton.
No, that's
Oh
that's
my
that's the
god.
joke. It's a pun.
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
it now.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Three Fingers, they were readers, so they had to stick their fingers all over the stones.
Yeah, that's something we're going to talk about in the Frenzied Flame video, which is going to be the next video. But
Eek.
the Three Fingers seem to have this thing with touching people and being more intimate. Yeah, we'll get into that next time. The ancestral followers exist. They're
They
maybe the most primitive human civilization because they
they worship
literally are
death.
against. They worship death. They are against the use of metalwork. So they are literally a Stone Age civilization. Um, and they have this whole death worshipping civilization. They believe in life coming from death. Obviously, the ancestral spirits are a big thing with them. They have these special axes that are called what, like winged envoy axes or something. I can't remember the exact
Yes,
name.
Also, that
something like
connects
that.
them to
That
the
connects them to the
Twin
death
Bird.
birds. Yep.
Yeah.
So interesting little
Which
connections there.
explains the blue and stuff.
These guys come into being. Oh, by the way, Stone Age civilization. These guys probably predate Old by a couple million years as well. Maybe a few thousand if we're being
They
like
do look it.
really generous.
Something I
Yeah.
found out the other day related to them. The ancestor spirits that you fight, when you're fighting them, they're actually not teleporting. They're like vanishing and then possessing the body of the nearest animal and then pick up attacks related to what that animal
Yeah,
does.
I actually learned about that recently. That was pretty cool. So I don't know who the fuck Elden John is. No one knows who he is. We don't know his iconography. I do believe is even in Farum Azula.
Mm.
I didn't see any of it, but I've heard that there are statues of him there. But like,
He's Mr. Worldwide.
there are statues of this guy pretty much everywhere. All places that have connections with Ould or Whitestone Civilization, whatever you want to call it.
Maybe he was a stand-in for Elden Lord.
He was probably an Elden Lord at some point. Maybe.
Oh yeah. Supposedly, George R. R. Martin was told when he was writing the Foundation to write the story of this world 5,000 years in the past from when we're actually setting the game.
Yeah, I imagine that's probably in reference to, like, this time period.
Lake of Rot.
Like, fucking around here. That's probably what that's in reference to. Because I could see that being 5,000 years ago. Not this shit, though. This shit's way too fucking old.
Yeah,
The
100,000
Stone
at least.
Age.
So this civilization exists. It seems to be around that time that the blind swordsman shows up and seals away the rock god. Because the Grand Cloister
Eh?
is stuff from the time of Uld. Oh, okay. Time to talk about a guy who's referenced like 2 or 3 times in all of the lore.
Hooray!
And one of your beginning characters follows
And
his beliefs.
one of your beginning character classes are able to descend from. So there is a talisman that we can get in Limgrave from defeating a golem boss in a big cave that has a lot of Uld ruins in it. Oh, by the way, Uld is probably the civilization that created the golems. Probably.
Would believe it.
Best guess, honestly. They seem to like hanging out around the Divine Towers and various other places that have akin architecture to that. You know, in that cave, they hang out around in the mountaintops, and they just seem to like those places. So I'm
And the
thinking...
Grand Lifts too, right?
Yeah, and they got the Grand Lift, though that is seemingly more of a creation of Landell. At some point, a blind swordsman comes along with a blade that flows like water, flows with water, and they seal away a god that was Rot itself, so presumably the outer god of Rot. And they seal it down there, or they seal its power down around the Grand Cloister
Ruins.
in the Lake of Rot. And they apparently did this with the help of fairies, I believe that's how the description goes.
Yeah.
So
I believe the fairies come from the Seaford River.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that the Shifra and Einsel rivers, one, seem to flow endlessly from the base of the Erd Tree. So, you know, flow endlessly from the Crucible, where the Elden Ring is, that establishes all the rules for the universe. And their names are words in Gaelic, I think. At least one of them. It's a word for fairy.
Right.
Now, flowing bodies of water, especially endlessly flowing bodies of water, are both literally and metaphorically, philosophically, directly in opposition to still bodies of water, stagnant bodies of water. You know, stagnation, a concept that often is associated with decay and rot. It's very likely that whatever gods that are associated with the Einsel and Shifra River helped the blind swordsman, powered the blind swordsman, embodied him, and sealed away the rot god to stop it from rotting away the world and turning it into something else. That was probably how that went. Keep this guy in mind.
Yeah, and keep him down under there. Don't let him out that river. Or pond, whatever.
His essence.
At some point, the Eternal Cities crop up, and these are seemingly ruled by the New Men. New Men,
No.
I do believe, means divine people, pretty much. It's possible that a lot of them, if not all of them, were Empyreans. Maybe. It's a
I
possibility.
used to think it was literally just new men, but spelled differently. Like, these are the new men. They're
Well,
new.
that wouldn't work because they're fucking old.
Also, they
And a
talk
lot of
about
them are-
missing the sky, but they've always lived underground or something.
Well.
So, like this talk, I heard that Astel was a punishment to take away their sky.
So, what happened was the Eternal Cities were seemingly the dominant force in the lands between at some point in time. And presumably effectively operated as every other major civilization did. They talked to the Two Fingers. They worshipped the Greater Will. They had an Elden Lord, probably. I think it's around the same time that the Fire Giants fight off the Ice Dragons. They take over the mountaintops, and they live alongside the
kill all of them.
Astrologers. Yeah, they kill
They
almost
kill
all
all
of them.
of them and leave only Borealis alive.
How sad. Not really. Borealis fucking sucks. Sad for us. Sad for us and us exclusively. So, the Fire Giants take over, and it's around that time that there are humans studying the stars in the mountaintops. These guys are the astrologers who will eventually become Glintstone sorcerers. And they
And fire.
seemingly are on good terms with each other. The astrologers
Yes,
considered them
they
their
are
neighbors. They created this
considered
sort of
neighbors.
Night and Flame. I guess it was because they didn't really do anything in opposition to the Flame of Ruin. They were just like, yeah, you guys do your thing.
Fire
Also,
Giants
like,
established forging.
yeah, blacksmithing originated from the Giants, so
Big deal.
yeah,
You
they're
have
kind of
metal
important.
now.
They're kind of important in that sense.
Creation from destruction and shit.
Now, the Eternal City, at some point, decided, hey, we don't feel like worshipping the Greater Will anymore. The Greater Will is kind of a dick. They maybe had the realization that the Greater Will doesn't really give a shit about them. Because it seems like the Greater Will doesn't really care about what sort of order is established, so long as there is an order. It could be as terrible as you want it to be, and the Greater Will doesn't care as long as you're abiding within the very broad parameters it assigns. And they tried to create their own lord, a Lord of Night, or Lord of the Stars. And they had this black moon thing that was maybe the source of their night sorcery. It may have been an actual outer god. Like, the idea of an outer god that
Yeah.
is just an eldritch entity because, well, the Age of the Stars is essentially us conjuring up the moon, and the moon blocks out the influence of the Greater Will. So,
Pretty much.
I think the moon is the only actual rival deity to the Greater Will. As far as we can tell. As far as I can tell, really.
That does seem how it works. It blocks out the existence of the Greater Will and the other outer gods
also
to let the people
makes
just do what they like.
the union of the houses of the moon and the Erd Tree much more significant, because it is actual cosmic rival powers. Now, the Greater Will, as you can imagine, is not super thrilled with this sort of shit. So, it throws the Astel, who I am going to refer to as a plural group of creatures, the Falling Star Beasts, and they annihilate the Eternal Cities. Now, originally, I was under the belief that the Eternal Cities literally got teleported underneath the ground or some shit. That doesn't really seem to be what
However,
happened. When
'cause,
you
yeah, they have
look,
architecture in the ceiling.
yes, the architecture in Nokron and Noxtella is built down from the cavern ceiling. Not all of it, but some of it. That is not something that would just get teleported down there. The Eternal Cities were so advanced and so expansive that they just went through miles of ground. They covered the surface, and they went down miles beneath the earth.
Oh, I didn't even consider that. They had to, like, bore all that out. Jesus.
Yeah. Maybe they didn't go all the way down, but you know, they built the wells to go down there.
They are now the Underdark.
Exactly. So the entire surface realm of their civilization was annihilated. It was just absolutely pummeled with meteorites summoned by the Astel, and it was wiped off the face of the earth. And all that was left of them was the scant few fucking suburbs that were left underground. It's like when you go to the edge of your town and there's like a gas station and a bowling alley. Yeah, that's pretty much all that's left of the Eternal Cities. That's basically what remains of their civilization. And they did actively do rebellion against the Greater Will. Do not forget the Finger Slayer blade exists. They created ways to kill the Two Fingers. They were like, fuck you. We're doing an armed rebellion.
Their own god. They tried creating their own dragons.
Yep, they
Their
tried
own
creating
lightning.
They tried creating all of their own cool shit. Though it seems like the Dragonkin soldiers either weren't created until after this happened, or were created underground because, well, you know, if they went haywire or something, it would be really easy to just keep them underground.
Yeah.
It's
Maybe they're
probably
meant as,
also
like,
yes.
some SL counter. Cause like, hey, they're sending this weird dragonfly thing after us. What if we make our own dragons to fight their weird quote-unquote dragon thing?
Maybe, though the what is it? The meteorite ore blade was something created in Celia, specifically to kill falling star beasts, and the Celians are the descendants of the night folk of the Eternal City. So probably something they kind of developed a little bit way after the
Well,
fact.
yeah. Then, yeah, there's precedence for they want to get rid of the Astel related stuff. Yeah.
I would too if they annihilated my civilization. It's probably also around this
so.
time, just somewhere in this general time frame, that the astrologers move to Liurnia, they become the Carrion Royals, and they become the first Glintstone sorcerers.
But why?
Why?
Oh, yeah.
They got tired of the cold weather.
Isn't Astel the failed Falling Star Feast, and the bull one is the successful one, or is it the other way around?
I would say it's not even a failure thing, it's just a life cycle. The Falling Star Beasts are probably just effectively
Caterpillars.
They're caterpillars, which
It's
means the
both
full-grown falling
evolution,
star
I
beast is a
think.
full-grown caterpillar. And then you have the malformed stars that hang around in some of the caverns. There's one hanging out in the Ainsel River. There's actually two hanging out in the Ainsel River.
Yes.
Those are like the chrysalis. That's why they're all, or recently emerged from a chrysalis.
That's why
I
they're
guess.
just hanging.
They hang around. Their wings are all messed up because they're not dried off yet.
Yeah, they're all grey because of, you know, not really
No
like powered up
development.
yet.
Yeah, and the rocks that they throw at you are their former rock body from when they were a falling star beast.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah. That's at least what it seems to be. It looks to be like the same texture of rock, though
Good
that
old
is kind of the general
metamorphosis.
texture for gravity spells. Anyway,
We've
time
got
for
to
the
learn
end of an
geology.
age. Marika. She's a person,
Hello.
right?
This woman.
Marika, along
I
with
don't-
some
I
of the
think
new
so.
men, presumably from the Eternal City, maybe even the Nameless Eternal City, they come along to the Lands Between. She may have already been called Queen Marika at this time, so she may have been a Queen of the Newmen, and she was an Empyrean, meaning the Two Fingers chose her to be host to the Elden Ring. So she shows up, the Two Fingers are like, you will be the new god. And she's like, okay. And the Two Fingers are also like, hey, have this cool dog man as your Shadowbound beast.
Free pet.
If you need a bodyguard, which you do, because you're God, and you're really important, or if you need someone to do some shady shit that no one else can do, that's what he's there for. Your personal servant.
Personal, very cool guy who says, cool lines.
Indeed.
And everyone
the
claps when he
coolest.
says them.
Everyone claps.
He
At some point
definitely
after
won't get fucking
this,
clapped.
we have the second most significant thing. The birth of the Erd Tree.
Rip Great Tree.
It seems that the Elden Ring, in some respect or another, maybe not necessarily merges with the Crucible, but after so much time, it has
Develops.
it's become so intertwined with the Crucible that it literally overtakes it, forms a shell around it made of grace, made of the power of the greater will, and it becomes the Erd Tree.
So America came before the Erd Tree.
Probably.
Or at least they coexist in the same
Or it
time.
was like around the same time.
Because when Marika became god, she had to set up all of the stuff for the Earth Tree.
Right. Now, we enter the biggest part of the timeline, the most expansive, the most detailed part of the timeline, the Age of the Erd Tree. This is the part that is, maybe? It's actually kind of hard to say which era is the most significant. But we're finally here. The Erd Tree. You know, the big, most iconic fucking thing in the game, other than the Elden Ring itself, which is literally the cover of the game. We are finally here, 48 minutes into the video.
Man, I can't wait to wear
Alrighty.
the Elden Ring on my finger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a big ring. I have a big finger for that one.
So-
Very weird finger, too.
The Erd Tree, somehow, becomes all-encompassing. All souls are theoretically recycled through the Erd Tree, but this is probably due in large part to the removal of the Rune of Death, which ends up creating the Golden Order as it is now, because that's kind of the defining characteristic. It's just nothing dies. Now, since she's become host of the Elden Ring, Marika needs to choose a consort to become Elden Lord. But there are a lot of things that don't like the Erd Tree, because it's kind of interrupting the natural order to things. You get rid of death, and suddenly, all of these guys from over here, way back at the start of the timeline, they are no longer the, well, they're not really that important anymore. They are no longer in charge. They're no longer major powers. They become
They're
outer
challenged.
gods. They're challenged.
Oh, no. Yeah, so now they want to, you know, fight back.
Naturally.
This is the war period.
And if you want to fend off all these attackers, you want your Age of the Erd Tree to progress past its mere infancy, you would have to choose someone really fucking good in order to fend off all of these attacking forces. So Marika goes to the really fucking strong and savage barbarian tribe that I guess existed in the Lands Between at this time, because, you know, humans are probably still relatively
But it was in
uncivilized.
Caelid.
Or some humans are uncivilized. It was probably definitely in Caelid. and picks a guy called Horalu to become her consort. However, he's kind of a fucking lunatic, and would not be able to work as a governing figure, even if it's wartime. So, in order to calm him the fuck down, and also give him advice on how to be a lord, he is given the Beast Regent Sarash, because I guess the Beastmen are still around to some extent at this point.
But where
Yeah.
does Ross come from?
Good
Sarosh is
question.
known as the Lord of Beasts,
He
who is
is.
an aged counselor.
Right, so he's fucking old already at this point. We're not entirely sure what exactly he's been doing. Maybe he was still in Farum Azula. Probably not. I imagine there were beastmen that left Farum Azula.
Well, we do find some in the caves of
Yeah, but they're of
Mimgrave.
Farum Azula.
Yeah.
And they seem to have fallen down with the debris from Farum Azula. Also,
Or how did you
Sarash
guide
is
the gravity?
notably different from all of the other beastmen because he's lion, and the rest of them are like dog guys.
I hope we get to fight Sarash as a DLC boss.
I would like that very much. I would like that a lot. Sarash has chosen not only to be Godfrey's normal pills, but as his regent. He is a lord. He is the Lord of Beasts. He has experience with being a lord, and he is able to advise Godfrey on what to do. Which means...
He's the
Vice
angel on his
President.
shoulder.
It means... He's literally the angel... Sarash means angel. He is literally the angel on Godfrey's shoulder.
What a good pair.
As his regent and advisor, either Sarash speaks English, or, you know, whatever the fuck people around here speak, or Godfrey can understand Lion.
Which
One
I
of those
believe
two.
is- That's something you expect crazy barbarian men to do.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't actually understand anything Sarash says.
No, Sarosh just communicates by gripping him harder on certain choices. Like, do I do this? And he just digs his claws in. Oh, okay, I won't do that.
Now, Rune of Death gets removed from the Elden Ring. This probably maybe happened after the fact, because it seems like you kind of need an Elden Lord to do alterations to the Elden Ring that aren't just fucking breaking it. So, yeah, that probably happens then, and that creates the Golden Order, because the Golden Order, as is described from the way we understand it, is just death is not a thing. That's the Golden Order. That's the way the Golden Order is supposed to be. The Greater Will has approved of it because it's still order. Doesn't give a shit. Doesn't care. However, a lot of other people kind of care about various things, and this is when we enter Godfrey's era of conflict.
Oh, the Glowmite Queen.
The Glowmite
What?
Queen. So these things probably happen around concurrent to each other. The first and most major one, kind of, the one that has the most overt significance in the game, is the war against the Fire Giants. The Flame of Ruin, being the embodied power of destruction, it is literally the embodiment of the god of destruction, is the only thing that can burn down the Erd Tree. As long as the Rune of Death isn't involved. So America's like, hey, Godfrey, get your boys together, we're gonna go fucking genocide these guys. So they do. Probably around the same time, because these two things are very interlinked with each other, in order to burn down the Erd Tree, we need to both unleash the Flame of Ruin and get the power of Destined Death. I guess the Rune of Death wasn't sealed away anywhere. Marika
No, it
just
probably
yanked it
just
out of the
kind of-
Elden Ring and just fucking, I don't know, threw it in the trash bin or something.
It
Yeah,
might
trash
have just
bin being
appeared elsewhere.
Because then-
Fire
removed.
Missoula.
The Glowmide Queen, who is an Empyrean chosen by the Two Fingers, just gets the Rune of Death. Uses
And
it
she
to empower the
weaponized it
Black
into
Flame. Creates the Godskin Apostles, presumably with the help of Eagle, the God-devouring serpent, and starts the God Hunt. Because I guess there are a lot of gods around to skin, apparently. I mean, Eagle is effectively a god. It's presumably
I mean, look
devoured
at
other
those-
gods in the past. If I had to guess
I
what
mean-
the gods are in this context, it would just be the Newmen.
Mm.
Because they're the divine
Wait,
people.
is this before or after they stole it from Malekith?
It doesn't get stolen
this
from
was
Malekith until way later. This is
before-
before Malekith has ever
Yeah.
had it.
And look at the
Yeah, This is when he solos all of the godskins before
yeah.
he even has it.
yeah, look at like the mausoleums. Those have like God's pride in them. There's loads of them.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Right.
those are demigods.
Ah,
I'll talk about those later. Like, actually, as part of this video, I'll talk about them a little bit.
Of course.
At some point, I guess during this period, maybe, probably during this period, Godwin's born. And that's the start of the Golden
Hey.
Lineage.
Oh, the
Godwin, we
Giga
know
Chad.
very little about, which is weird, because he's theoretically really fucking important. Actually, not theoretically. Godwin is very important, and we know
He
very
is
little
the
about
most
him.
important of
I
the
haven't seen it
three.
yet, but Motown just made an hour-and-a-half video about him.
Are you fucking serious?
Yes.
Real?
Oh my
Hold on.
god.
How?
I'll check this. You focus on the video.
I don't know, he makes an hour-and-a-half video about every character in the game.
I know, it's amazing.
And also, Morgott and Moog are born at some point. This is probably a good point to talk about paganist stuff. So early on, the Crucible is not a thing that is disparaged. You know, for a lot of the people that are around now, the Crucible was just a thing that was around not that long ago. They're much more in tune with nature. Godfrey is like a Viking guy. The Crucible Knights, literally called Crucible Knights, they use aspects of the Crucible. They embody parts of nature. Their armor is designed to look like primordial gold, which is red. By the way, the dragons use red lightning.
Mm-hmm.
Primordial
The
gold.
armor for the Crucible Knights.
The most
as well.
ancient of servants of the greater will. So back during this time, the Omen were probably not despised to the same extent.
At least before the main establishment of the Erd Tree, it was very much accepted during the time of the Great Tree.
Yeah. So like, I don't really know how things were going for them. I
Hold
think
on a
it's
moment.
probably safe to assume that this was also around the time when people were like, "Ew, Omen, yucky, go away."
Yeah, put them in the
So,
sewers.
Because I don't
what-
think Morgott and Moog were ever allowed to roam around freely. I do
No,
not get that
they
impression.
were. They
So
were
with the,
shackled until the very shattering happened.
Crucible Knight stuff, right?
Mhm.
You're saying they came and being around about now, but how are they connected to the Crucible then?
They believed in the very essence
Oh
of
wait,
the
the Crucible Knights were presumably people from Godfrey's clan, and
Right.
those guys would have been around prior to the Erd Tree. They would have been around prior to the
Right, I
Crucible
see.
becoming the Erd Tree, or at least they would have heard about it. Most of them were probably around like 5 minutes before it turned into the Erd Tree, so they were like, that was a thing. For most of these guys, the Erd Tree is just the new stage of the Crucible, as opposed to in the present where the Crucible is the primordial form of the Erd Tree. It's kind of an inversion. So yeah, at that time, they're more like, yeah, the Crucible, we're in tune with nature. There's not so much a focus on religion at this point. It's more so religion backing up, we are going to fucking go to war with everyone and kill everyone that gets in our way. Yeah!
Well, yeah, it's just a cause, a reason to do it.
Because back during this time, apparently humans were bigger and stronger, crown was warranted with strength and whatnot. Everything during Godfrey's age was about strength and exerting your will through violence.
Which included the war against the giants and the war against the Storm King.
Yes, we'll
It's
get into the
so
war with the
funny
Storm
that
King
we-
because I think it happens a bit later.
We've seen so little of Godwin that the only picture we have for he is born is him dying.
I know.
Oh,
We don't even know what the fuck his face looks like. We don't know what he looks like from the
Well, we
front.
know what it looks like now,
Yeah,
because
look,
he's
look,
now
yeah.
cliffside fish.
Yeah.
look, I
well,
bet Godwin
prior to that, we
was
don't know what his face
absolutely
looks like.
gorgeous.
He would
I
probably
bet
be
he
a
was
pretty
go-
boy.
Ah,
They are carving the rune of death into his back.
I've wondered if that's carving it, or if it's like they stab him and because he is the first of the demigods to die, it just appears in his flesh.
Oh, that'd be
I
sick.
imagine it was carved.
I don't know. I never really got that impression. It looks so strange to be carved. Like all of these little like veins coming off of it and stuff. The flesh
Magic
looks more like it's been
carving.
cracked as opposed to stabbed and cleaved.
Well, look, maybe they carved the soul and that affected the body.
Yeah,
I guess, maybe. That's a possibility.
the same way he's got those veiny bits going into his eyes after he dies.
Yeah. So, the war against the Giants ends with Marika killing the Fell God, presumably one of the titanic giants we see. During this point, the Knights of Zamora join Godfrey's side. That's why We encounter a few of them down beneath the mountains. There's even one in a hero grave. The
Mm-hmm.
trolls betray the giants because they probably figured being enslaved was better than being annihilated.
And then they get enslaved anyway.
Well, they were probably like, we're going to get enslaved, but I guess that's better than being dead. Though nothing should be able to die anymore. Don't think about that. Just don't worry about it.
Imagine being
Unless
constantly assaulted.
unless the giant thorn things, which I assume are Marika summoning the roots of the Erd tree to fucking murder giants.
And suck their essence into the Earth tree.
That's maybe
And
what's
every
happening.
boss we kill stays dead without a root of
Well,
death.
they don't necessarily stay dead, it's just not enough time is passing for them to come back.
Huh.
Yeah.
And then she realized, oh shit, the fucking giants can't fully die.
The
The fire's
giants,
still there.
what was it? There's no point in killing all the giants because the Flame of Ruin's never going to go out,
Mm-hmm.
and the Fell God is embodied by the Flame of Ruin. The giants are
So it
effectively
lives on.
vessels for the Fell God. You could argue that the giants are an entire race of Empyreans. Kind of like the Newmen maybe are. Not clear.
Yes.
Probably not.
I also learned from the very first stepping point in the beginning of the game, you can see the giant.
Oh yeah.
Hot
Yeah, that was something
flame.
Vadi brought up in a video of his. It's hard
Yeah.
to see in-game, but you can see it in the loading screen. And you also see it in the cutscene for the Erd Tree burning down.
Yeah.
So, Marika kills the Fell God, apparently, realizes that the flame will never die, and so just leaves the last giant to fend for it, because it's free security. You don't have to pay him, you don't have to provide benefits. He just stands there overlooking the graveyard of his entire civilization
Cursing
forever.
the poor bastard.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to go over this a couple minutes ago. The Two Fingers choosing the Glowmide Queen is very interesting, because why would they do that? That's in active opposition to the current order. Well, maybe it was kind of a test. Because the removal of the Rune of Death is probably the most significant alteration to the Elden Ring in its entire history. None of the other, like, tendrils coming off of the ancient version are as literally central to the Elden Ring as the Rune of Death is. They're all just kind of appendages. They're just kind of offshoots of
Roots
it.
and stuff.
And considering how important death was,
Yeah.
you don't want that to be
It's an
away.
essential.
The Rune of Death is literally overlapping with Marika's rune. That upper arch of the Elden Ring, like that uppermost part of it, which is Marika's rune, you know, it becomes Marika's rune. It literally overlaps with it. Which is very interesting because that means the Glowmide Queen's rune is an inversion of Marika's rune. Ooh, isn't that
Who
interesting?
could have seen it?
Yeah.
It seems like a big hypocrisy in the story that almost seems like a plot hole is that the Erd Tree, the Greater Will, was trying to find a new Elden Lord to replace Marika,
Yeah, a
but
new god.
you couldn't get in to replace Marika without burning down the Erd Tree.
We'll get into that, don't
Oh.
you worry. And besides, the Erd Tree gets restored when you become Elden Lord anyway, so that's fine.
I believe back then you didn't need to burn it straight away because that was only a thing set up by Radigan bringing in the forms.
Yeah.
We'll
So,
make
yeah.
your one tree.
Malekith,
Like,
by
boy.
himself, as far as we can tell, without the power of the Rune of Death yet, defeats the
Solo's
Glowmide
older
Queen, an Empyrean who has the power of the Rune of Death. Considering
what
how
kind of
death
power?
probably worked at that time, you know, considering that, oh, the Black Flames don't just kill everything anymore, that basically means Malekith did a successful first try, no-hit run against the Glowmide Queen. What a guy.
He's peak.
oh,
Yeah,
However-
congrats to him. I'll donate $5.
He
almost
explicitly...
everyone other than you gets their wins first try.
Yeah. So, explicitly, or I guess it is not explicitly stated that Malekith kills the Glowmide Queen. It is only ever stated that he defeated her. We don't know what happened to her. As maybe Melina, who knows?
Ooh.
But he seals destined death within his sword. So now the Shadowbound Beast of America is literally wielding the concept of death as a weapon. He is the
He's
only
basically
person.
the Grim Reaper.
He is the only person in the lands between that can permanently kill anything. That's quite a guy to have as like your personal servant.
Yo, my dog can perma-kill you.
Now,
Now, hey, if America wants someone gone, now she can really get them gone.
at some point after this, the golden age of the Erd Tree ends. What does that mean? Well, when the Erd Tree originally came up, it was so fucking brilliant, it was like having a second sun in the sky. It was incomprehensibly brilliant. I don't understand how anyone could see anything at this point in time. Dew would fall from the branches of the Erd Tree and like blessings. That's where a lot of the talismans come from. This was like an age of plenty and splendor, and they thought it would last forever and that the Erd Tree was immortal, and then it turned out that it wasn't. It became middle-aged or something. It got past its prime. The exact significance of this is unknown. However, I feel like this is probably the beginning of the tipping point away from pure Erd Tree worship and more towards the Golden Order.
Worship.
Yeah. Less about the tree and more about what's within the tree. Ooh, how philosophical and spiritual. We're focusing less on the physical and more on the immaterial, on the interior, on what lies within.
I love philosophers.
I love the Enlightenment era. It was probably because of the Erd Tree dimming that some of the ancient dragons were like, hey, we should go fucking kill these annoying upstarts. So Grand Sax, the biggest, hugest, most giant ancient dragon ever, assails Lanedell. And somehow they kill him. Somehow they kill him.
They
Oh
killed
God,
him.
he's so big. He's
I
not
guess
set
Godwin
dressing.
killed him. Maybe Godwin fought him
assembled-
like a God of War boss and just bonked him in the
Yeah.
head really hard with a hammer or something.
They
Or a spear.
assembled a
I would
party
love
of
to believe
6 to
Godwin
kill
did
him.
it.
I was always under the impression Godwin did it. That because
God-
Godwin was the one that led the war against the ancient dragons. But
And
yeah,
then he did the best thing ever. He befriended
he
Forsax.
befriended a dragon. What a cool thing to do. So the war against the ancient dragons happens. It's led by Godwin. It's unclear exactly how long it lasted, but it does indeed seem to be a less significant conflict to the war against the fire giants, because the ancient dragons don't exist in opposition to the Erd Tree, hence why after
The dragon cult
Fortisax
gets
is
made.
defeated and befriended, the ancient dragon cult becomes a thing, because the dragons
The
worship
dragons
the greater
impart their
will.
knowledge.
There's nothing about them that goes against the Erd Tree. As a matter of fact, they are beings that already live forever. We're creating an eternal kingdom where nothing ever fucking dies. They're perfect. They're great.
The most substantial thing to also happen is this was the first time Lanedale's walls ever fell.
It's the first, probably first, like any of the walls fell.
Yes.
It is the only time the inner wall has ever been breached. Just because of, like, he's fucking gigantic and flies. How would the walls stop him?
Make the wall
Build
bigger.
bigger walls.
Now, what is
Don't
Godfrey
Fortnite.
doing during this time? I don't know. Fighting other shit. He's busy.
Probably the Storm King or
The
something.
deal with Godfrey is that he can't be literally everywhere at once. So that's what Godwin ends up serving the purpose of. Whatever Godfrey's not fighting, Godwin's fighting right now. If it's significant. I don't think the Liurnians are that significant because Godwin didn't get sent to fight him. The Liurnian
Instead
Wars
of-
happen because, well, you know, the Carians kind of fucking worship an actual rival god. Kind of worship an actual rival god to the greater
That
will.
god
Like,
being-
concept.
The moon.
Oh, yeah, right.
The moon, which is pretty much like, stop having gods fuck with things. Stop doing that. Because, you know, the sorcerers are pretty much scientists to an extent. They study the stars, they try to transcribe fate and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there are two wars against the Liurnians, and this is when Radigan enters the scene. Radigan, as far as we can tell, is a person descended from the Giants, which means he is technically related to a race that is capable of embodying the power of a god. They are all kind of Empyreans. Radigan is descended from them. We have other evidence of humans being descended from giants because Dung Eater is seemingly descended from the giants. He's got red hair.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Also, he may be a small, like, really small giant. That is kind of the deal with Milos, sort of Milos he has. It's the spine of a giant
Yeah.
that's way too short. He's a short-ass giant.
Yeah. Dungy is like a tarnished guy, and he wishes he was an omen.
Yeah.
And he likes to abuse the malformed. He takes pleasure in the omen, the malformed giant that was Milos. Yeah, Dongi's fucked up.
So if you wanted to know how could Radigan exist when the giants are the size of a fucking office building, well, it's because they can, I guess, have birth defects and be really tiny. And by really tiny, I mean 10 feet tall.
Yeah, he didn't eat his greens.
Exactly. So the Urnian Wars happen. The Second War is ended when Radigan decides to marry Renala. At some point in the past, Renala has an encounter with the moon, and she becomes the Moonlit Queen. It's not really that important. Renala is not the most important character in the world. This is a union between the houses of the moon and the Erd Tree, and we bring about peace. And so, by this point, I would say the most significant of Laendel's enemies have been pacified, but not all of them,
Yeah.
because Godfrey's still busy doing shit. We haven't eliminated literally every single threat to peace yet, so we're kind of... we still got some work to do. Some point after this, Rykard, Radahn, and Ranni are born. Rykard gives me eldest sibling vibes, don't ask me why.
The bit gives it away.
I believe it.
What the beard does?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And he's the political one. Anyway, they're born probably not that long after the fact. Ranni's chosen by the Two Fingers as an Empyrean and is given her shadowbound beast Blythe. So, I don't think Ranni was chosen as an Empyrean at birth, because
Unless the
it
thing
seemed like
breathed her
Blythe
fate.
didn't get introduced until she was already a child, and I don't mean like a fucking newborn toddler. I mean like she was
we're
like...
talking about Renala.
Yeah, well, we're talking about Ranni at the exact moment.
Yeah.
A little bit. I think Ranni was already like a young kid when the Two Fingers were like, you're an Empyrean. I mean, Marika presumably wasn't chosen until she was an adult. So you don't need to be chosen by an Empyrean, as an Empyrean at birth. It does
It just
seem
kind of happens.
we are correct. We were correct a fucking while ago. There are two ways to be an Empyrean. You are born of a single god, you are a god person, or the Two Fingers are like, you can become a god. You're good.
Oh. So is the player character an Empyrean?
No.
Nah, we're an Elden.
No, you're only meant to be a consort.
Exactly.
Yes. You're meant
You gotta
to
pick an
be-
Empyrean.
Exactly.
Well,
Now,
you
Blythe
just
was
kill him.
gifted to Ranni after he
Radahn
was created.
goes to Celia, and he learns gravity magic so he can keep riding his horse. He's probably already learning to become a warrior. He's taking after his dad. At this time, Radigan is learning sorcery at Raya Lucaria, and that seems to be pretty much all he's doing.
Radahn also
On
gets
that.
very inspired by Godfrey.
He does, which is why it's probably around this time that Godfrey defeats the Stormlord and conquers Stormvale. There's probably a god of storm, and I imagine the Stormlord was its champion, its vassal, maybe their equivalent to the Twin Bird, something like that. He defeats it in single combat. And that's probably when Radahn starts getting his inspiration from Godfrey. He's like, wow, Godfrey's so fucking cool. I want to be just like Siraj. But he's also really proud of being related to his dad, so he becomes the Red Mane Lion. What a cool guy, that Radahn. Anyway,
Oh yeah, I love that.
Radahn
no
also had a pet
more
cat.
existential threats to our civilization. Thus,
Hooray.
we no
World
longer need
conquer.
Winston Churchill. I mean Godfrey.
No! No!
Thus, America is all like, oh, Godfrey, we don't really need you anymore.
No more Giga Chad.
Like, you don't really serve any purpose in my Age of the Erd Tree at this moment. So you and your soldiers, I'm taking away your grace and fuck off. Go.
You provide nothing to the kids. You're being
Not to get
divorced.
political, but irrelevant.
Yeah. So stripped of grace, hounded from the lands between, and sent upon the long march. Specifically because they're struggling. It's theoretically going to make them stronger. And Marika feels that whenever she needs them to come back, they will be even
Secret.
stronger than they were now. They will be
Oh, that's
strong
the
enough to
training
meet
arc.
the moment. They're being exiled into a training arc. So Godfrey goes and he leads the Tarnished on the Long March out of the lands between across the world. Godfrey eventually
gets
ends
to
up in the
keep the cat.
Badlands. But he gets to keep the cat, so it's okay.
Yeah.
And then Marika
Not
needs to choose a new
someone's-
consort. She chooses Radigan, probably for a number of reasons. He's descended from the Giants, a race of Empyreans.
Fusions of redheads.
This is where you should edit out and reinsert my fertile comment.
No.
No.
Damn. That was probably something she thought when she looked at Radigan. She's like, wow, 3 kids already, and none of them are weird mutants unless you count them being 20 feet tall. Nice.
And red hair, that's exactly
Looks at
my
the
type.
Omen twins.
Yucky. Red hair. Gross.
Oh, he has no soul.
Whatever, I can get behind it.
But-
Actually, the opposite.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And also,
oh.
Hey,
Radigan is actually a peacetime leader. You know, he brokered peace between Leyndell and Liurnia. He brought about an era of peace within Liurnia. So she's like,
He's a
that's
very smart
exactly
man.
what I need right now.
Rather than the bloodthirsty barbarian.
Yeah. Instead
I
of
mean,
the
like, if you have
pagan
no one to
Viking,
fight-
I need a Catholic priest, kind of.
Also, if you
Who
take his
won't-
form in the final boss fight, he's also mildly twinkish.
He's twinkish by Godfrey standards, yeah.
So what's one?
This is like calling a fucking Guilty Gear character a twink.
Exactly.
There is one, though.
They're twunks.
This begins Radigan's era of peace, which actually has more fucked up shit in it than
And lots
then
of
Godfrey.
revelation.
God. Okay, so the deal here is there are. I think there are. Radigan's age probably lasts about as long as. It probably lasts longer than Godfrey's, all things considered. Because
Yes.
by the time of the present, Godfrey's time is like basically buried. You have like a couple paintings of Godfrey every once in a while, but the culture of the time has effectively been erased. We've moved away from the more paganist style that's more accepting of nature and the Crucible, and we've become much more centered around the Golden Order and introspection upon that, the fucking laws of the universe, how those things operate, embodying the ideals of Golden Order fundamentalisms, you know, laws of causality and regression, all that shit. They've become a much more philosophical and religious society. It's the Christianization of Europe.
Oh my.
I'm sure that's where Gold Mask came
They
from.
also
Well, yeah, I
established
mean, he was a Golden Order
fundamentalism.
fundamentalist.
Love that guy.
If you think about it, he's effectively the Martin Luther of this era, when she's like, this religious organization is full of shit. It's
I
fucked
love
up
naked, silent man who stares and points at tree.
to do math in his mind.
It's all math. It's
My
all
religious math. He is doing religious math, by the way. Never forget
Did
that.
you know that's actually
Go
something
based.
Isaac Newton was known for?
That's fascinating. I've occasionally been recommended ads about how God is the center of math or something. Actually, I think I shared a screenshot of that one time. So anyway, this is
Yeah.
probably when Golden Order fundamentalism is founded. This is kind of Radigan's big shtick in his efforts to become perfect. Is just, well, let's fucking study and fully embody the principles of the Golden Order as much as physically fucking possible. Urge-free worship starts to become a thing of the past, and we just focus more on the Elden Ring itself and the rules
Right.
that it establishes for the world.
About that worshipping the Golden Order thing,
hmm
your wife Radagon has been picking away at it. Everyone before her has been picking away at it. This is no longer the Golden Order.
Oh no,
is just-
you misunderstand, Neve. The Golden
Right.
Order is just what it is now.
Ah,
Yeah.
right. So they're editing the Golden Order, not like.
No, they're editing the
off-
Elden
off
Ring.
it.
The Golden Order is just the current version of the Elden Ring.
It's
Ah.
just the stuff that prays
They
to it.
keep taking rings out of the Elden Ring to make it simplified.
Yeah, actually, if you look at that, this right here, it doesn't even include Radigan and Marika's runes. Radigan's being the kind of like grid pattern that's in the background of it, and Marika being like the top arc. This is just like the center rings of the Elden Ring.
Compare that to the dragon one earlier.
Yeah, look at
Oh
this.
no.
This is where we are now.
Well, that's where it
This-
shattered.
We go way fucking back here. Way back.
There it is.
Look at that.
You can see it inside of that one, but now it has tree roots and stuff.
That's the Golden Order right there. Talk about reductionism.
When an artist makes their logo too complicated,
Oh
so they
my god,
simplify
where
it
did
over
my
time.
timeline go? There it
Yeah,
is.
it's like all
You
the
went into the
companies right now.
future.
So,
Man, I can't wait for the new Firefox logo where it's just a swirly red
actually,
half circle.
this is important to state. A lot of the stuff
Right?
in Godfrey's age happen out pretty dispersed throughout the age. Like, kind of. But, like, I would say most of these things happen in relatively quick succession. This shit, I have no idea what the gaps are between some of these things. It's just the general order in which it happens. Because kind of the deal with Radigan's era is not really much happens in it. It's kind of the idea with an era of peace, is everything's content and nothing happens. There's nothing disrupting the peace. Golden Order fundamentalism established. Radigan goes to Lanedale and he brings some of his kids with him. Radon is made general of the Red Mane Army. Rykard's made the Praetor. He's put in charge of the Inquisition, which is responsible for looking for people doing a little bit of a heresy, you know?
Mm.
Raya Lucaria revolts against the Carians around this time, because I don't think Renala waited 5,000 years to have a mental breakdown about her husband leaving her. So that's when that happens. And Rani's, I guess, kind of like a representative of the Carian family, because it still exists. It's still at peace with Lanedale, but, you know,
Kind of a minority now.
you get one seat. You get a seat at the council.
Hmm.
Which I'll talk about a little bit, if I don't forget to talk about it when we get to Godric, who does indeed get a spot on here. Actually, he gets a couple points, because Godric has a little bit of lore significance, but he's like...
The run.
He's actually, I would say, probably a little bit more significant than Renala, unless you count the fact that she is the mother of several other demigods. Nah, I guess he's the least important demigod. Never mind. So I'm thinking around some point here. I'm assuming this is during Radigan's age, because this is when we're bigger on religious shit. And heresy
Yeah.
would be like an actual thing that we're worrying about, and I do believe this sort of thing was part of the Christianization of Europe.
My favorite quirky
A
bastard.
certain
Windowing
apex
liar.
redditor named Shabriri.
It's the bait lord. Look at that hair.
He-
Look at that
he
fucking
definitely-
smirk.
So Shabriri, he got to read one of
Oh,
them stone
you want to
shields.
get the bottomless appetizers? You want to get the endless breadsticks at Olive Garden? That is literally impossible. It is impossible for there to be endless breadsticks.
You know, the funny
It's definitely
thing
kind of
is
like a
how
little.
we-
It looks a bit like a Roman style statue. A bit. It looks like
Yeah.
some old-fashioned shit. This smug
So,
bastard. So Shabriri
he-
Fuck that guy.
decides on a whim, hey, wouldn't it be really
He plans
fucking
this
funny?
all out.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if I accused the Great Caravan of worshipping the Frenzied Flame? Wouldn't that be the funniest thing ever? So then probably Rykard and the Inquisition are like, yeah,
They
you guys
soaked him.
suck. And they fucking buried them under Lanedale. They
And
gathered
then
up an
they
entire
realized
clan
it's
of
a
innocent
mistake.
merchants, and they fucking buried them underneath the city. And because there's no rune of death, they can't die.
And then they realized it was a mistake, and they gouge his eyes out.
And he was just like, haha, checkmate, liberals.
Yeah,
Oh, they're
Look
he's
at
still
that
down
smug
there.
bastard. They're still down
got
there
a
because they
place-
can't die.
Yeah, he's got a playful smirk about it because he knows that's all according to plan.
And I
He's the
imagine,
reason Magnus exists.
if you and your tribe were locked underground in a giant catacomb without any fucking food or water, and it was literally impossible for you to die, you would probably start fucking praying for the yellow chaos flame to melt the world away. You would probably
you
start
start
doing that.
Each other.
And probably start eating each other. That would probably also happen.
It also might be a move out of spite because, hey, we were entombed for worshipping that guy. Then yeah, let's fucking worship that guy.
I love self-fulfilling
Rykard.
prophecies. Don't you love
Yeah,
that?
So,
you know, the
it
funny
is-
thing is, Never, that you say that, because
Right.
in Kale's quest, he says the exact same thing.
Well, there we go.
Just
Yeah.
to confirm, it has been confirmed, right, that all of the merchants were worshippers of the frenzied flame that escaped the purging.
Yeah.
No, they didn't actually really pray to the frenzied flame until they got falsely accused. But
Yeah,
he didn't
because then they
believe
were
that
them.
like,
makes
fuck
sense.
you guys. So yeah, some of the merchants escape, but then are of course hunted down because, well, you know, heretics and stuff.
Good.
And that's why the
By
nomadic
good or
merchants
well
are
or bad.
nomadic. That's why they run around everywhere. That's why they never stick in one place. But they summon the Three Fingers, which is just down there now, I guess. Waiting for someone to come that can be a
To get
Lord
hit
of
from
Frenzied
both ways.
Flame.
Yeah, he looks very funny.
Yeah, it is a very funny thing. Anyway, Rykard builds the Volcano Manor, and it's probably because he found out Eagle was there. I imagine it was very early on that Rykard was like, man, I fucking hate my dad. He's an asshole. I should eat him or something.
Full of dad.
I didn't know he built the manor, but that makes
I'm
sense.
thinking he did, because there was a civilization there
Yeah.
before. They had their volcano hexes and shit, but the civilization just kind of fell, disappeared, as ancient civilizations do.
Yeah.
And Rykard revitalized, he recreated those hexes, and then probably went and built the volcano manor there.
Yeah, he was also an architecture student. This is why his dad hated him.
You know, that makes sense, actually.
Also, if we're about to do a Frenzied Flame video after this, Vati just also
Probably
released
not.
one recently.
Are you fucking... He released one like 2 months ago. That's not...
Yeah, that's
Was
not
it?
recent.
Oh, I keep getting recommended it. I thought it was like.
I
within
keep
the
getting
last 2
recommended it
weeks.
as well, but no. I think
Oh,
it's
it's a good
probably at
video.
this point that Radigan merges with America. I think it's around now, probably.
What makes you say that?
When
Well,
I remember you
because
used to be unsure if they were ever unfused.
now I'm very certain.
they definitely became one then.
Yeah. The reason I put all these things before then is because, well, they were separate for at least some period of time, and there's nothing that happens here that I think requires them to be separate. Or, you know, requires them to be one person by now. Everything after this point, I'm pretty sure they have to be one entity by now.
If they weren't, then that would be the whole joke about I have a secret second family with kids.
Oh.
No idea.
Where they just
So-
keep gender bending and going back to their other spouse before they decide to quit.
America decides that she and Radigan need to become one being. They need to become one god for some reason. It's probably more of her introspection into the Golden Order stuff. They become a divine rebus. And I'm fairly confident this is what allows Melania and Mikula to both be born as Empyreans, but, you know, divine self-cest is going to make some fucked up kids. So both of them are cursed upon their birth. Melania is afflicted with scarlet rot, and Mikula will be a perpetual child. Also, at some point, Moog encounters the Formless Mother. I don't know when, but at some point.
I would
Probably
say
after
Logan
this
counts
point.
as after the shattering because that would be the only time he's possibly let out.
Maybe, but I feel he encountered the Formless Mother while he was down there in the sewers.
Because when he was down in the sewers, he was shackled just like Morgoth. So yeah,
You know what, that's fair. I mean, I guess it could have been way after the fact.
the shackles only worn off after the war began.
Ah, that makes sense, actually. See, this is why this doesn't have a set point on the timeline. I just don't know when it happens. So yeah. Melania and
As I
Mikula
said.
are born. At some point, fairly early on, Melania loses her arm to the rot. She gets a prosthetic, and she learns swordsmanship from the blind swordsman.
Oh, so that
Oh,
guy was
cool
still
guy.
alive?
Yeah,
How
Yeah.
long was this fucker living?
I don't
Look,
fucking
it's
know.
Not
it's
even,
Elden
like,
Ring. Most
reincarnated
people
at
can
all?
live that.
Just living this long?
I want you to
Yeah.
take a look back. All the way
How
back
It's Elden
here.
Ring.
is this
People
guy?
can just get old.
I don't know, but it's quite fitting that the guy that sealed away the Scarlet Rot was the person that taught Melania her swordsmanship, probably taught her a bit about, you know, self-control and restraint, holding back the power of the Scarlet Rot, all that stuff. It's quite fitting that they met each other. Also,
Somehow.
that guy knew waterfall dance, like 100%.
Oh yeah, he's actually Genichiro himself. Yeah,
Mhm.
Genichiro lost his eyes.
That's issue.
So, after a while, Mikula decides to abandon the Golden Order because there's nothing the Golden Order can do to cure Melania of her rot, so he goes and he creates the Halig Tree past the consecrated snowfield outside the territory of the Erd Tree, but there's no kind
Okay.
of war with them or anything because it doesn't explicitly go against the Golden Order or anything, and Mikula
Yeah.
is a golden child, so they're like, whatever. It's fine.
And
I guess.
also, it's a nice sanctuary for all of the mistakes of
It
the
is.
world.
That is true.
Yeah, keep them all
Also,
there.
at
Let 'em
some
out.
point, Godric obtains lordship over Limgrave. Because I guess he
Oh
just
my
inherits
god,
it or
it's
something.
Godric goaded.
Godric the Goated. So, the
Volcanic
council in Lanedell, before the Elden Throne, why do those people have their seats there? Well, they are all lords of regions. The reason Godwyn doesn't have a throne there is probably because he just hangs out in Lanedell, really. He's not
Or
a
they
lord of a different
removed his
territory.
throne after he dies.
Nah, I don't think they would replace him after he dies, because when you think about it, we go in order. Godric is the ruler of Limgrave, Mikla and Melania rule the region of the Haligtree, Radahn rules Caelid, Rykard rules Mount Gelmir, Franni rules Liurnia. They all rule the different major regions of the lands between.
So a few things about that.
Mm-hmm.
Godfrey took Limgrave from the Height family, apparently. And the Haligtree is just on the edge of the consecrated snowfield where the giants used to live, right?
Pretty much, yeah. Well,
And
the
this all
Haligtree's
happened
actually off the
before
coast.
the night of the, the...
Yeah, all of this stuff would have to happen probably a bit before that.
Hmm.
So, at some point after this, Ranni and Rykard actively conspire to steal the Rune of Death from Malekith. And then they do it. Well, more so Ranni and the Black Knife Assassins do it. I think the Black Knife Assassins probably actually stole it because they were able to turn invisible. They sneak into Lanedell. They kill Godwyn. Godwyn is the first of the demigods to die. He is basically the first of the demigods to die. There are others, minor demigods, probably more Godric-level demigods, probably a bit
Yeah.
above. Those are the soulless
Almost,
demigods that
yeah.
are in the walking mausoleums. They are probably decapitated in some sort of vain effort to bring out the power of their spirit, because all of these spirit guardians from the mausoleums are ritualistically decapitated to turn them into spirits. And it's probably also the same reason that Godwyn's body is buried in the deeper depths, because they're trying to return him to the Erd Tree, trying
Or
very
is it?
vainly and desperately to recycle his soul, even though it's not possible. Godwyn,
Godwyn's body is both on that cliffside and supposedly in the bottom of
well,
Limgrave Castle.
that's because he is literally spreading through the roots of the Erd Tree.
Yeah, the
Any place
Limgrave
that has
Godwyn
like
is
a
just
lot of
cancer.
death root influence, a lot of death stuff, even in Farum Azula, Godwyn's faces are there because Godwyn has become a parasite growing through the Erd Tree.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
he has
just a
more than one
cancer for the
face now?
world.
Yep. So, when Godwyn dies, he dies in body, either because they carved the half mark into his flesh, but the way they talk about it, it sounds like this whole Hallowbrand should have been formed. So,
I feel like the reason
Ronnie got one half and he got the other
Yeah.
half
my
because they both only died
interpretation
halfway.
is either because they, like, basically killed themselves at the same time somehow, Godwyn died in spirit, Ronnie died in body.
Yeah.
And that wasn't supposed to happen. That was not
Well,
supposed
Ronnie
to happen.
wanted that to happen to herself.
Which is why it's maybe possible that Ronnie was like, hey guys, carve this into Godwyn. Do that, you'll get the Hallowbrand.
It must have been Black Knife Tish.
And then
She's the
didn't
only
mention...
one powerful enough to kill God.
Well, it seems like they
Electro
kind of
is
ganged up on
powerful.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how
There was
strong
a
he
gang.
was.
That's a
Yeah,
really
Is that
good
his
question.
beard or his
So-
hair?
He seems
Albert,
like he
all them.
should be able... Godwyn seems like he should be strong enough to fucking low diff all of these guys, really. Or
Look at all that
girls.
hair.
He got ganked.
Well,
Oh, he just has
They
big hair. They like
probably-
big hair around here.
well, they probably couldn't. He couldn't know because
They're
had
invisible, and they don't make any
soundless armor.
sound.
That picture looks
So,
like
yeah.
the cover of a heavy metal album.
It
They
does.
probably
It
stabbed him
does.
first.
Welcome
and
to
then held him
Soulsborne
down.
concept art.
Oh, I bought a book of it.
It's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, from all those art contests from Vati.
Oh, phenomenal shit. So that happens. Ronnie is now just probably kind of secluding herself in Karya Manor. The Black Knife Assassins are hounded from Lanedell, and everyone's like, oh man, this is fucked. This shit's fucked up. Malekith becomes Garank to collect the Death Root, because he feels really bad. He feels responsible about the Root of Death being stolen, so he makes it his duty to go and get all that shit back.
It's also possible America set him up for failure.
Yeah, because we don't really get much into it in this video, but it does seem very heavily implied that America may have kind of orchestrated the Night of Black Knives to some extent as well. But I think what Ronnie did may have fucked things up a bit. So then America was like, shit, guess I gotta shatter the Elden Ring.
The biggest image on the map for a
It
good
is the
reason.
most important thing that happens in the whole timeline. It is literally the reason the game happens. It is the first thing we find out about when the game got announced, is the Elden Ring shattered by someone or something.
Why
Yeah,
would she break
I've
the
always
laws of
thought the
physics,
narrator
though?
might have been Radagon if his voice didn't sound so old.
Yeah, we don't really know who it is. So,
Like,
at some point, I think either right before this happens or right after, Marika tells all the demigods, do whatever you want, but if you don't amount to anything, you're just gonna be fucking sacrifices, really. You will be sacrifices for whoever does become something.
but why
Marika is
would she?
imprisoned within the Erd Tree by the Greater Will and also Radagon, because Radagon's a Golden Order fundamentalist. Radagon has immense obedience to authority. Now that Radagon is also God, his obedience is to the Greater Will. So when the Greater Will is like, what the fuck? Why would you
Yeah,
shatter the Elden Ring?
yeah, that's what
Radagon's
I'm
like,
asking. Why would she do that?
it seemed
So the
like
Liu
it's
Kang
still
took
not
over.
100% clear. It feels like her ultimate end goal is to just be freed of being host to the parasite amoeba that is the Elden Beast.
Yeah, because the Elden Beast and the tree are just a parasite. They feed off
Also,
anything
possibly
that
out of
returns
grief
to the
and fear.
roots. They feed off anything
Maybe.
that returns to the roots.
So, she's imprisoned, and then the shattering begins, because the Elden Ring shattered, and the Elden Ring is obviously a source of immense power. So, all of this happens over a pretty short span of time. All of this, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, they treat the shattering like it's almost still ongoing.
Demigods fight to collect Great Runes. The first major event in this is the first siege of Leyndell. Godric is there. Godric's armies try to take over Leyndell. Radahn is there. Radahn is acting in defense of Leyndell, and they kick his bitch ass out. They
And
kick
then
him out.
Morgott jumps for Gon.
Godfroy apparently had already been grafting himself, and he's defeated by Dragon Knight Kristoff, and
Oh
he's
yeah,
imprisoned.
Godefroy,
That's
the
a guy
most
that exists.
important one. I forgot.
It infuriates
He
me to no end that he gets a spot here on this fucking timeline.
he is a descendant of Godwyn. But
Very-
Wasn't it a theory that who was it, Malekith or somebody apparently possibly defeated Morgott before the game started?
No, it was Morgott defeated Radahn during the
Yeah,
shattering.
Oh
you know,
yeah,
this
Morgott
image I
fighting
have
Radahn.
right
That's
here.
what it was.
We'll get into that in a minute.
There it is.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was there.
Aren't I great? So, Radahn takes over Leyndell pretty much. He is the defender of Leyndell, and it's all like, yeah, we're saved. Radahn, you freed us. Freed. More like under new management. Because Radahn
Oh,
also wants to be
right.
Lord, so Radahn takes over Leyndell.
Yeah.
He's effectively
also,
occupied the city through
and
benefit
during
of being
the
a defender
war
of it.
Godric brought in, Margit finally escaped the sewers
At some
and became
point...
iconic.
Oh wait, I have him here. So, two major things that happen at an unclear point, I would say, after the Shattering begins, because it's after they've claimed their Great Runes. Rykard feeds himself to Eagle, and Mikla embeds himself in the Halic Tree.
So he was growing the Halic tree all that time before embedding himself in it? I
Yes.
thought the Halic tree grew from him.
He maybe used a bit of his blood, but he embeds himself in it after it's
It
already started growing.
existed.
I think he was
But it
mostly
would
growing it
only
out of the
pro-
Scarlet Rot.
Oh, another fun fact. Apparently they cut it out of the game where on top of Leonard the horse, Radon was supposed to have a long-tailed pet cat that loves jumping from high places.
Yeah, I'm kind of mad
That
they
cat is
removed
still
that.
mentioned in the
Yeah,
cat
it's
ring.
like an icon for a like a rune stone or something of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cat is only left in the cat talisman, sadly.
So Morgott breaks out of the sewers, and he goes and he claims his great rune.
Hooray.
And then
And he
Morgott's like,
starts hearing
hey,
voices in his
Radon.
head.
And Radon's
Get
like,
the fuck
who the
out.
fuck are you? Like, literally, who are you? I've never met you in my fucking life. And Morgott's like, anyway, get the fuck out of my city.
My brother.
Because you are here as an undeserving occupier. You're a fucking traitor. Get out.
Willful traitors.
So Morgott
also,
just shows up under the name of Margit because can't let anyone know that a fucking disgusting omen is the child of Queen Marika. And him and the Knights of Lanedale manage to kick Radon and the Redmane army out of Lanedale and then kind of seal off the city. And Margit kills a shitload of champions. Like, just any cool, strong guy that shows up, he fucking kills them. He stacks up their corpses.
What
Yeah,
a
he made-
gatekeeper.
He made
Also-
piles of bodies.
Yeah. Funny thing to
Gaslight
note,
and gatekeeping.
I've seen like some discussion of this where people are like, "Oh, is Morgott stronger than Radon?" No, he got the jump on Radon.
Yeah, that was basically... Radon
I mean, it
was
might
like...
be relative.
Radon had
'cause-
no fucking idea who Morgott is. He had no idea
Yeah.
who he is. How would he
But
know?
also,
mean-
like,
Also, some people argue that Radon is younger here. I have
Yeah.
doubts about how much time could have passed between this and the Battle of Aeonia.
They
I'm
even
like-
age like normal people.
Probably,
Maybe.
I don't fucking know. I don't think enough time
Like,
passed for him to significantly age.
I would also like to say, like, another thing, which kind of counters what I said earlier.
Mhm.
When the narrative is like, "Oh, Radon, strongest demigod of the Shattering," like that might not be counting Morgott and Moog because, you know, lore stuff says, you know, they're kind of supposed to be secret existences.
Yeah, but also,
Nobody's
I
supposed
think
to know they exist.
Radon's power is on a higher scale. Just because of all the gravity
Yeah.
shit, he's literally holding back the stars.
Yeah,
I
he
wonder if
has
Melania
more
could have beat
feats.
him if she wasn't blind and missing 3 of her 4 limbs.
I don't think she lost her eyes until during that fight. That's what it looks like to me from the trailer, because she's got like that black ichor leaking out of
But
her
she's
helmet.
literally missing like 70% of her body when we fight her, and she's the toughest boss.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue that she's actually better off with the prosthetics.
Probably because it's like modifications. Anyway, after
Because
this
they're
happens,
not being decayed.
we get the Battle of Mount Gelmir, in which
The
Morgott
most
is like,
gruesome battle of all.
Morgott's like, what the fuck is Rykard doing? What is he doing? And then just, you know, sends an army there. And
Like,
oh,
there's like a
last one?
grafted scion there. There's like a whole bunch of shit in Mount Gelmir. It seems like just kind of everyone was like, go fight Rykard, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
One of the Crucible Knights defects.
Why? Yeah. Why is the Battle of Mount Gelmir the most harrowing battle of the Shattering? Because it was just it was a shit show. It was just a bunch
And
of,
there
it was just
some
all of the shit happening there. It was just a
Rykard
fucking mess.
implemented Vlad Tepes style.
Oh yeah, and they were crucifying people there, so
Hashtag
that also
snakes
happened.
in a volcano, am I right?
And it's also a literal uphill battle.
That too, yeah. I imagine
by
when
the
the
minor
most
archery.
harrowing battle of the Shattering happens, Raya Lucaria gets news of that, and they're like, fuck this shit, and they seal their gates. They close their doors permanently. They're like, nah.
They received the
we're good.
newspaper and were like, fuck.
Headmaster, a second siege has hit Lanedale. Oh god. It may have also been that they were getting word that Melania and the Clean Rot Knights were going to be marching
likely.
down through Liurnia. They go on a campaign. I believe the cause of this campaign was
Hmm.
in order to kill Radon, allow the cosmos to move, and allow the eclipse to happen.
Hold on. I've noticed something, right?
Mhm.
You have put Mogseal's Mikola, in an unplaced position.
Because I'm not sure
then
when
it's-
exactly after this it
No.
happens.
It's
No, it
straight
would've been
after his
before.
fight with Radon.
I thought it was
Cool.
before, The
It
Queen
happened
Rod's
Yeah.
while
fight.
Melania was in a coma from fighting Radon,
Yeah,
right?
I
Ah,
think that
right, I see
I
now.
don't believe it's from the
originally
coma.
I was
I
like,
think it
oh,
happens
Melania's
right
just
when she's
like.
traveling.
Originally, I'm just like, oh, Melania's like, who the fuck took who took Mikola? Where the fuck is Mikola? Now it's more like it seems like Mikola needed the eclipse to happen for things to go on. That seemed like it was a big part of whatever he was planning. So it was like, Melania, you need to go beat Radon. Go do that. You're the only person that can do that.
Yeah,
Feasibly.
that
Melania's
was
the
happening.
best schemer in the entire game.
And
Yeah.
since Melania is gone, you know, the Blade of Mikola, Moog's like, hey, I'm gonna go steal this defenseless demigod child for completely
Yeah,
inconspicuous
And
reasons.
completely ruin his curse.
yeah, they don't actually tell you this, but the small children in the Halleck tree are free. You can just take them.
I have
What?
43 in my
Free
house.
Empyreans in the
Free
Haley tree.
Empyreans
Go
of the
get
Halleck
one.
tree. And this is when Moog fucks everything up, because now
He's
Mikola's
off to go get a
fucked, and the
cupcake.
Halleck tree is fucked, and Melania's fucked because Mikola's not around anymore. It's really bad. Moog is another character responsible for everything just being kind of terrible.
Yeah.
Like, the
Moog just
rest of
wanted a
the lands
cupcake.
between could have been awful, but the Halleck tree would have been fine if it weren't for fucking Moog.
He just wanted a cupcake.
Oh. So,
Also, is
yeah.
there a spot on the timeline where we're now like going crazy?
Oh, that's a way
Um,
back when. That's pretty
Yeah,
early
Host
on.
gone mad already.
Yeah, she
Where
went.
she
She went
just
nuts a
starts
while ago.
Endlessly
like-
reincarnating her students to where they don't have legs.
Yeah, that was
or
back
any
around
personality.
here. That was not long after Radigan left. So, let's see here. Oh, Melania does her campaign. She travels down through Liurnia. She gets to Limgrave. Encounters Godric. She, like, sneezed in his general direction and he almost died.
Yeah.
And
so-
because Godric, a descendant of the Golden Lineage, is absolutely fucking humiliated by like a tripoplegic or something, he decides, you are missing body parts? I'm gonna start adding more body parts to myself, and he begins grafting.
Surely, I can't lose if I have 17 arms and she has one.
Oh! He still loses like instantaneously. Melania does like one combo and kills him.
Even
She probably
Kenneth
just
Hyde
thinks
makes
so.
fun of him.
Look,
Yeah.
Kenneth Hyde is great.
Never forget, grafting is cope-based in origin, literally.
Well,
So the
Cope
Battle
is
of
fighting
Aeonia
this now.
happens. This is the last
Ah.
significant event of the Shattering, in which the two
love-
strongest demigods fight each other. You know how that goes. Melania is forced to discard her pride to meet Radon's measure. Thus, she unleashes the Scarlet Aeonia. She stops resisting the Scarlet Rot. She falls into a coma. Radon is infected with Scarlet Rot and slowly loses his mind. And Clean
Caleb
Rot
is
Knight
next.
Finlay carries her all the way back to the Halleck Tree. I want you to look at the map of the lands between so you can fully appreciate the fact
Oh,
that Finlay literally carried her across the entire map.
oh, we got a
Remember,
bit of
Finlay
respect on
does
this guy's
this.
name.
Girl.
Holy
Yes.
shit.
Yeah,
And that's when they
Finlay.
turn
Finlay's a girl
Caleb
boss,
into
actually.
actual
Ah.
hell.
Yeah, Finlay does this while also dying of Scarlet Rot.
Okay, yeah,
Oh,
like all of the
yeah.
Clean Rot Knights are.
And
That's
she's
incredibly
unconscious the
based.
entire time, Melania.
Yeah, she's literally carrying Melania.
That's very cool.
And
I
then
like
what? She
that.
just drops her off in her chair next to the Halleck tree.
I always like lore characters where it's like, yeah, they get referenced like one time, but their one reference is being like a cool person.
Yeah,
I like the little
Kristoff.
tales of little heroes.
Does Niall appear anywhere on the timeline of importance?
Not really. He's just kind of a guy that exists, honestly.
Oh, I don't. He commanded multiple spirit ashes, so I figured he must have done something noteworthy.
His most noteworthy thing was, I think, formerly being a soldier of Godwin, who then helped
Oh.
out Mikola.
He also lost a foot at some point.
Yeah. Anyway, since all of the Lord contenders are, well, locked
Fucked
out of the
up.
Erd Tree, or fucked up and fucking insane,
Or fucking each other.
the Greater Will is like, well, I guess we gotta call these
Otherwise, ye
guys.
tarnish.
Then that's when
They
the
come back.
the intro cutscene happens, because it's like, well, we need someone to be Elden Lord and fix things. Why don't we get those guys America kicked out like 5,000 years ago? Okay.
Gideon off there. The
And then
Way!
actually probably like 100 years happen before the actual game starts, so that we have other Tarnished doing things. Several
Yeah.
Tarnished try to become Lord, or many try to become Lord.
The most
All of
notable
them
being
fail.
Mike and Bernard.
The ones that get closest before the game starts are Vike, who got to the mountaintops and then got tricked by Shabriri into going down to the Three Fingers, but he forgot to take his clothes off before he went in.
Stupid Mike.
And Bernal, who maybe actually got further, but
He got to Farum Azula.
yeah, he actually got to Farum Azula. So he actually achieved more than Vike did, but Vike gets to be on the cover of the game. When his Finger Maiden was burned in the flames, he was like, I did not want that to happen. I am not cool with this predestined shit. Fuck this, I'm out. I'm gonna go become a recusant. And then the game starts. There you go.
Yeah.
There's multiple people in the Volcano Manor who like could have been the main character, but they gave up partway through and got too cynical.
Yep. So there you go, guys. That's the timeline. Almost 2 fucking hours, but there you
Whee!
go. That's the
Pete.
timeline of the Lands
Yeah.
Between. Are you
That's
happy
so
now?
happened.
I am going to pass out now.
Yes,
You
Let's
do
see,
that,
did we
chill.
forget anything?
Nothing important, relatively
This can
speaking.
be ironed out eventually.
Yeah,
That's
so
what
what
the other
clip we tell
videos
you
are
gonna
for.
give this one? Fucking the complete Elden Ring timeline.
It's just gonna be a
explained.
timeline of the Lands Between. 2-hour-long video.
Yeah, put Elden Ring in the
Love to see
title.
it.
Oh yeah, and
Elden Ring
Malekith and
timeline.
Geraint have this weird thing where, because
The
Farum
same
Azula is
person.
separated from time, he'll recognize you if you hung out with Geraint when you fight
Yeah.
Malekith, but if you kill Malekith, Geraint doesn't disappear.
Yeah, it seems to be like that. Also, maybe a
You
weird
can also
facet
argue
of
the
him being a
same for-
Shadowbound beast.
You could also argue that Lanciax also appears in Farum Azula because one of them uses her glaive.
Hmm.
I don't know, that just to me seemed like more of like just kind of a general Ancient Dragon thing, but it's called Lanciax's Glaive because Lanciax is the one that taught other people how to do it. Anyway, that's all for
yeah.
today's video. There's the big Elden Ring. Yep, there you go. I've been talking
Yeah.
for 2 hours. You guys know the
Elden
drill.
Ring.
History.
Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. There will be more Elden Ring. Check out my Discord if you feel like it. It's linked
It's
down
not
below.
great, I swear, it's definitely
You
not
will never
insane.
escape. So yeah,
Give a like if you want DLC.
I well,
Yeah, also subscribe
easy
for that,
links.
you know.
Subscribe for that as
Yeah.
And more
well.
lore.
That will
So the
definitely
next-
make it happen.
Up next will be Frenzied
Yeah.
Flame Lore.
My
I'm
favorite.
actually on the line with Miyazaki right now. If we can hit 6K by the Game Awards, yeah, we'll get DLC.
You have
My
a month
uncle
and a
works
half.
at Nintendo. I can make it happen faster.
Nah,
My
I'm
uncle
actually on
works
the phone with
in Nintendo.
Miyazaki right now.
Yep,
Peak.
it's
Says
that
hello.
easy. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Until then, take care.
Farewell.
Bye bye.
Bye.